Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Desi, and I am here with another Game of Thrones chapter. This is Eddard 1 / Chapter 4, and I really enjoy these Ned / Eddard chapters because going forward, we really get a on-the-ground bird's eye view of how the Game of Thrones is played, even though Ned makes a lot of missteps, a lot of action, and a lot of plot changing and monumental events happen in Eddard chapters. So these are probably A tier for me in terms of enjoyability, even though it is frustrating to see Ned make these missteps. But you can't blame him. I don't think Ned is a stupid man. I think he's very logical, but I also think he is he's completely isolated from the Seven Kingdoms up in Winterfell. So the missteps that he makes, you can't fully blame on him. Because if you put yourself in his shoes, it's easy to see how he makes these mistakes. That doesn't make them any less frustrating. Anyways, the first part of the chapter opens with the rotund, jovial Robert Baratheon, King of Westeros, entering Winterfell. And he arrives with a massive party, including his children, his brother-in-laws, the Lannisters, and then, of course, his wife as well. So that's 3 future POV characters that we get to glimpse. Not meet, but glimpse. And Ned hasn't seen Robert in 9 years, and Ned is shocked because he's almost recognizable. Robert used to be a great warrior, but he has become rotund. He has dark circles under his eyes, and he is now morbidly obese and has trouble moving around and everything. But he still jumps off of his horse and gives Ned a bone crunching hug in front of his entire court, which is very Robert and very funny. So our first impression of Robert is as a jovial glutton, essentially, which is largely true. That's a good definition for him. Although he actually has a temper that we get to know as well. So there's a bit more complexity to Robert than just a jovial fat man, I guess. And we get a bit of lore about the North as Robert goes to his family's crypts, Ned's family's crypts, the Stark crypts. This is our first introduction to the Stark crypts where all the Starks are buried. And he wants to go pay respects. So Robert describes the North as this vast, empty, kind of wasteland almost. Although there is a lot of timber and natural resources there. It's kind of like Russia, I guess, if you were to compare it to a real-world country. And there's just no people there, and it's also very cold. Robert complains about getting stuck in a snowstorm in summer, which is unbelievable to him. And I actually did an analysis of the climate of Westeros, and I believe I compared Winterfell to Calgary, Alberta, or Moscow, Russia, where they have a summer. It's not necessarily a warm summer. They have nice days, but you also get snow fairly early on and a very cold winter. So Robert then goes into how much things are better down south, where there's actually a real summer. He's saying that the granaries are full, that everyone is rich and happy and drunk. And of course, Robert goes on a diatribe about how the women are dressed immodestly and how turned on he is because Robert's a glutton. So we now know that Robert is a womanizer, much to the chagrin of his queen. And Robert wants to go to the crypts to see Ned's sister Lyanna, and Ned is very touched by this. And there's a reason why Robert wants to see Lyanna so bad, because Robert was supposed to marry Lyanna, evidently, but Lyanna got kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen, which basically was the straw on the camel's back that started the Great War that Robert won. And if Lyanna would have married Robert, Ned and Robert would have became brothers in more than just name. And going down to the crypts, we learn that Ned lost his father, his sister, and his brother during the rebellion. His father was killed by King Aerys the Mad, and his brother was killed in a very cruel way trying to rescue his father, and Aerys set it up for him to die. It was very tragic and very scarring. And Ned's older brother Brandon died at 20, and he was supposed to be the heir of Winterfell, but he died at the hands of the Mad King. And we also get a brief bit of lore when Ned reflects about how Lyanna died, about how she forced Ned, or asked Ned to promise him. She said, "Promise me, Ned." And he made a promise with her, and she was dying in a room that smelled of blood and flowers. And this alludes to the most prominent of fan theories. It's basically been confirmed by George, and we'll touch up on that later as we go forward. But I won't go in too deep into it here. But needless to say, Ned is deeply traumatized by his sister's death and was very fond of her, and still to this day is very sad when he thinks about Lyanna. And Robert is more angry that he felt he didn't get to avenge her properly, even though he killed Rhaegar Targaryen at the Trident. He says he kills him every night in his dreams, and he goes on and on about it a little bit. So a bit of lore about how the war started and how it concluded, and the battle it concluded at, and how Robert had won his throne, essentially. And then the two discuss the untimely demise of Jon Arryn, Robert's Hand of the King. He went basically perfect health to dead in a couple of weeks, and they're both suspicious of these circumstances. And his widow Lysa fled right afterwards, and Lysa, from what we know, is Catelyn's sister. So they're all kind of intermarried, which is very common for the time. And she also fled with her young son, Robert Arryn, who's the heir to the Eyrie. And we learn that Robert Baratheon is very upset about this because Robert Arryn, the younger, was supposed to, not the younger, I should say, Jon Arryn's the father, but Robert Arryn was supposed to go to Casterly Rock to be a ward for Tywin Lannister, which Ned deeply disapproves of because Ned hates the Lannisters, or is very distrustful of the Lannisters, I should say, and doesn't want them around. And then Robert goes into a monologue about how he hates governance, how he hates counting coppers, and he thinks that winning the throne was easier than actually holding it, and he doesn't really want anything to do with managing the realm. Now Jon Arryn sort of did it for him. Jon Arryn was his Hand of the King. And we get a really funny expression about how basically, I'm going to try to use YouTube safe terms, the king eats and the hand wipes the posterior. So the hand does all the dirty work, so to speak, while the king, especially Robert being the glutton that he is, just gets S-faced and goes looking for women, while Jon had to basically clean up his mess afterwards. And Robert says a funny line. He says, "I'm surrounded by liars, flatterers, and fools. It can drive a man to madness." This is funny and ironic because the king he usurped was King Aerys the Mad. So maybe Robert is figuring out why Aerys went mad from all this governance, even though it's largely because Robert is neglectful of duty and just wants to party. And he's always been that way, as Ned describes him. He just wants to have fun, and obviously he just wants to he was a good warrior, and he was a good partier and a good lover and everything else like that, but he doesn't sound like he's a very good king, and he wants to shorten his responsibilities to have somebody else clean up for him, or handle all the nitty gritty. And then of course, as we might suspect, and as Ned suspects, Robert asks Ned to be Hand of the King, which Ned does not want to do because he's happy in Winterfell with his family, and he doesn't want anything to do with Southron politics, and doesn't want to clean up Robert's mess. But because he's honor bound and because Robert Baratheon is his king, Ned reluctantly accepts. So, conclusions. This is a very heavy lore-building chapter with a lot of dialogue. Robert is introduced as a jovial man who loves Ned, but is more interested in pursuing women and wine than governing the realm. And we learn that Ned deeply distrusts the Lannisters, which will be explored more later. Also, Ned and Robert suspect foul play in the an untimely death of Jon Arryn. Although he was older, so old age isn't completely out of the question, but we're going to get a lot more information about that coming forwards. Anyways, that was our first Eddard chapter. Oh, I forgot to... There we go. Here's a nice thing of the crypts that I forgot to put in there. This is Robert and Ned in the crypts of Winterfell. I'll leave you with this bit of art. I forgot to change it over when I got to that section. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.